My name is Daniel Brooks, and for 4 generations my family lived on a vast stretch of green farmland on the outskirts of Willow Creek, 3,500 acres of soil that carried every memory we ever made. My father used to say, "Land is the only thing they can't steal unless you let them." Turns out he was wrong. Someone did try to steal it, and that someone was the Willow Creek HOA, a homeowners association that didn't even have the right to exist on my land. On a cold Tuesday morning, I opened my mailbox and found a thick envelope stamped with the HOA's logo, and inside was a shock. A document stating that my 3,500 acres had been rezoned and reassigned for community development, and worse, already sold off. According to them, I had failed to comply with land use payments. I laughed at first, then I realized this wasn't a joke. They were claiming legal ownership of every acre my family ever owned. The HOA's president, Linda Carver, known around town as HOA Karen, strutted around with a clipboard like she owned the world. When I confronted her, she smirked and said, "Daniel, the land wasn't being used efficiently. We did you a favor. A favor?" They sold $28 million worth of land without my signature, without my permission, without even a warning. When I stormed into the county office, the sheriff reviewed the documents, and his face drained of color. "Daniel, these signatures look forged. The zoning code isn't even valid. This is criminal." But instead of waiting for slow legal battles, I decided to use the same system they used to steal from me. I opened my laptop, contacted 3 developers I knew, and within 6 hours, I had something the HOA never expected. I sold their entire subdivision, every house, park, street, clubhouse, in one single overnight transaction. The best part? The subdivision was technically still registered under my land parcel ID, which meant the HOA had accidentally built their community on my property. And since they forged my signatures, at 6 a.m. the next morning, every resident of the subdivision received a notice. "This property has been acquired by Brooks Development. Please prepare for mandatory relocation pending investigation." The HOA panicked. People poured into the streets. Linda Carver screamed at everyone to remain calm, but her voice was shaking. She banged on my door yelling, "You can't do this." I handed her the same words she once threw at me. "Actually, we did you a favor." The sheriff arrived again, this time with county investigators. When they saw the forged papers, the illegal land transfers, the unauthorized construction, they handcuffed Linda on the spot. Her face twisted with disbelief. "You can't arrest me. I'm the HOA president," the sheriff replied. "You're also under arrest for fraud, forgery, and grand theft of land." By noon, the county invalidated every illegal sale the HOA made. My land was restored, and the subdivision? The developers agreed to convert it into a massive rental community under my ownership. Overnight, I became the landlord of the entire HOA's former kingdom. As Linda was escorted to the police car, she glared at me. "You ruined everything." I smiled. "No, I reclaim. I still remember the morning the letter arrived. Thin paper, official seal, and the same arrogant tone the HOA had used for years. But this time, the message was different. It wasn't about grass height, fencing color, or noise complaints. It was a declaration that my 3,500 acres of ancestral farmland had been lawfully reallocated and sold, as if generations of sweat, soil, and sacrifice meant nothing what was mine. Land isn't just dirt. It's history. It's family. And no HOA, no matter how powerful, gets to take that away. For a full minute, I stared at the letter, waiting for my anger to settle. It didn't. My chest tightened, my fists clenched, and every memory of my father working these fields flashed before me. The HOA had crossed a line no one should ever cross. They had touched my blood. I stepped outside and looked across the fields my grandparents carved out with their bare hands. Birds flew in slow arcs over the crops, unaware that on paper, this land no longer belonged to me. The wind brushed past like a warning. Do something. People in town always said the HOA was corrupt. But selling land they didn't own? That wasn't corruption. It was war. And I wasn't the kind of man to lose quietly. My first move was silence. I drove into town, made a few calls, and reached out to a private legal team my father once trusted. They had retired, but one name still picked up: Judge Rosa McConnell. As soon as she heard my situation, her voice went cold. "Meet me in the courthouse basement," she said. "Bring every document you have." Paragraph 6. The courthouse basement was dim, lit by a single buzzing tube light. Judge Rosa laid out folders thick with HOA violations, fraud cases, and undisclosed bribery allegations. None had been proven, because no one had enough leverage. "But you," she said, sliding the land deed toward me, "have exactly what we need. We drafted a plan, sharp, dangerous, and perfectly legal. If the HOA wanted to steal from me, I'd take something far more valuable from them: their entire subdivision. All 217 homes, their clubhouse, their lake access, their security gate. Everything that IT started that evening." I filed a claim using a 1984 land use clause the HOA conveniently ignored. Their subdivision sat on land connected by an easement to my farmland, an easement that legally gave me authority during disputes. They didn't read the fine print. But I did. Why nighttime? My legal filing rolled into the county records like a silent bullet. The clerk, an old friend, simply nodded. "They're not going to see this coming," he whispered. The next morning at 6:12 a.m., HOA President Karen Stevenson stormed onto my driveway, red-faced and trembling with entitlement. "This is illegal," she screamed, waving the new legal notice. I calmly sipped my coffee and replied. Neighbors peeked out from behind their curtains. Karen fumed. "You can't take our subdivision," she barked. I leaned closer. "You sold my farmland. I'm just returning the favor." Karen called the police. Not surprising. 2 squad cars rolled up, lights flashing. The officers approached, read the papers, and their expressions changed instantly, from authority to shock. "Ma'am," one officer said to Karen, "he legally owns the entire subdivision until further investigation." The screams, the gasps, the chaos. It was the most satisfying orchestra I had ever heard. For once, they felt powerless, and they hated it. But I wasn't done. That afternoon, an investment company arrived. Black SUVs, crisp suits, and briefcases full of contracts. They had been waiting for an opportunity to develop luxury cabins beside the farmland. Now, I own not only the land, but the HOA community blocking their expansion. By sunset, I had sold their entire subdivision. Every home, every street, every signpost, to the investment firm. It took them less than 10 minutes to wire the money. The ink dried before the HOA could even process what was happening. When the homeowners received the notice of ownership transfer, panic rippled through their streets. People ran outside, shouting, arguing, grabbing documents as if their walls were collapsing. In a way, they were. Karen barged into my yard again, voice cracking. "You ruined us," she cried. "You stole everything." I looked at her for a long moment. "No," I said. "You stole first." Within a week, the investment company began restructuring. The HOA board was dissolved. Karen was removed. Mandatory fees were canceled. Half the ridiculous rules were erased. And the farmland, my father's land, was fully restored to my name. One evening, standing on the edge of the fields, I watched construction trucks roll into the subdivision. New signs were installed. New leadership took over. Balance returned. Justice tasted like dust and wind and victory. By the end of the week, the HOA had dissolved. Their president vanished. Their board disbanded. The emails, threats, and intimidation were meaningless now. I took a moment to stand on the highest hill of my farmland, looking at both the crops and the subdivision. It felt surreal. The fight had been long, but victory was undeniable. 7. Sarah joined me, handing a cup of coffee. "To us," she said. I raised my cup. "To justice." The media returned for follow-up interviews. I calmly explained the legalities, my actions, and the importance of protecting farmland. No arrogance, just facts. The farmer's market nearby became a symbol of victory. I proudly displayed my crops, the same land the HOA had tried to steal, now feeding the community. Silence slowly adapted to the new rules. Some grudgingly accepted it. Others thrived under the fairness and transparency I brought. Children played on lawns I now controlled. laughter echoing through streets. I realized victory wasn't just legal. It was moral, emotional, and communal. The local mayor visited, curious about how one man could upend an entire HOA. I explained succinctly, emphasizing diligence, legality, and perseverance. Social media influencers visited to cover the story. They filmed every corner, every symbolic act of justice, and the story went viral across the country. The former HOA president attempted to sue in small claims court, but Frank had anticipated everything. Their case collapsed instantly. News outlets dubbed me the farmer who outlawed the HOA. I laughed at the title. It sounded dramatic but fair. Meanwhile, the farmland flourished. Crops thrived, irrigation systems worked perfectly, and a land that had been threatened now stood unchallenged. The neighborhood slowly realized I wasn't a villain. I was a guardian of fairness. Respect replaced fear, and harmony began to settle in. HOA members tried to regroup elsewhere, but word of my legal and strategic prowess spread. No one dared challenge me again. I finally took a day off, walking through my farmland without worry. Every crop, every tree, every boundary was secure. Sarah joined me with a picnic. We laughed, recalling the HOA's arrogance, imagining their faces when they realized defeat was inevitable. Local journalists visited again, seeking insight on how to protect property rights. I share my story candidly, highlighting diligence and perseverance. Slowly, the story became a case study for farmers nationwide. Workshops, seminars, and online tutorials reference my actions. Despite fame, I remained grounded. My life was still the land, the crops, the sunrise mornings, and the family who had stood by me. The HOA's former members faded into obscurity, a cautionary tale of arrogance, greed, and ignorance of the law. Community trust strengthened. Neighborhoods that once feared corruption now thrived under transparency and fairness. Every evening, I watched the sun dip behind the fields. The land was mine, yes, but more importantly, justice had been restored at ND, so what began as a fight for survival ended as a story of triumph. I had defended my legacy, reclaimed my land, and ensured the HOA's arrogance would never hurt anyone again. Months later, the farmland and subdivision coexisted in harmony. The crops thrived, and the neighborhood became a model of cooperation and fairness. I walked through both areas, feeling a rare sense of peace. Sarah and I sat on the porch one evening, the horizon ablaze with sunset colors. "We did more than reclaim land," she said softly. "We reclaimed respect and justice." Local kids waved as I passed, some calling me the hero farmer. I chuckled, knowing the title wasn't about fame. It was about standing up for what's right. That I received letters from other farmers across the country, asking for advice, expressing gratitude. It was humbling to know that our fight inspired others to protect their legacies. The former HOA president attempted one last public statement, but it was met with ridicule. His arrogance had become a cautionary tale nationwide. I occasionally visited the subdivision to check that harvest time. The fields glimmered like gold under the sun. Each stalk of wheat and row of corn felt like a small victory, a reminder that hard work always pays. Everything was in order. Homeowners respected the new rules, and the sense of community had strengthened remarkably. Sarah and I hosted a small celebration for neighbors, friends, and allies who had supported us. Laughter, food, and stories filled the night air. It felt like more than a victory. It felt like justice fulfilled. As the stars appeared overhead, I reflected on the journey. Anger, strategy, courage, and perseverance had led us here. The HOA had underestimated a determined farmer, and that mistake changed everything. And so, the 3,500 acres of my farmland in the subdivision I reclaimed became a story whispered across towns, a legend of justice, cleverness, and unwavering resolve. We had not only won back our land, we had won respect, fairness, and peace. News outlets continued to cover our story, this time focusing on the moral victory. Headlines praised fairness, ingenuity, and the protection of farmers' rights. Local schools invited me to speak to students about justice and perseverance. I share my story, emphasizing courage over anger. Sarah documented the journey in a photo album. Each page captured struggle, strategy, and triumph. The story of how we turned adversity into justice. Our farmhouse became a hub for farmers and neighbors alike, a place to share experiences, strategies, and victories over corrupt systems. The former HOA members tried online smear campaigns, but the public overwhelmingly sided with us, praising fairness and legal savvy. One evening, a drone flew overhead, capturing the juxtaposition of golden farmland and the perfectly orderly subdivision. I marveled at how both thrived under rightful management, that I trained a few neighbors on property management and legal awareness, ensuring the subdivision would never again fall prey to negligence. The community B. Sarah smiled as children played in open fields, neighbors chatting freely. The harmony we fought for was now tangible, Egan hosting seasonal fairs, festivals, and markets. The subdivision and farmland blended seamlessly, creating a model for other regions. Local government officials sought advice on replicating our success, consulting me on land management, dispute resolution, and fairness policies. Point 1. The former HOA president's attempts at public appearances were met with mockery, reinforcing the lesson that arrogance and greed rarely succeed. That I organized a legal seminar for farmers across the state, teaching how to safeguard property and challenge corrupt organizations effectively. The subdivision residents held a surprise appreciation event for me and Sarah, thanking us for bringing justice and stability to their lives. Every corner of the farmland and subdivision now bore the mark of careful stewardship, reflecting years of dedication. Strateg. Sarah and I often walked the boundary between our crops and the houses, discussing future improvements and long-term plans for the land. Our story inspired books, podcasts, and documentaries, all chronicling how a single farmer could legally and cleverly overturn justice. Community pride flourished. Neighbors volunteered, maintained common areas, and ensured fairness in every interaction. The subdivision was now a true model community. I received letters from families across the country, sharing similar struggles. Many said our story gave them courage to fight corruption in their own communities. Point 1. Quiet evening. I looked at the stars above the fields and neighborhood, reflecting on every challenge we overcame. The anger, the strategy, the meticulous planning that had led to triumph. Point 0. And so, the legacy of the 3,500-acre farmland and the reclaimed subdivision became more than land. It became a story of justice, perseverance, and the unwavering courage to protect what is rightfully yours.